We have another special episode of Classis Wisconsin Weekly. So every once in a while, we get to sit in person with somebody, and I am sitting in person with Ben Hoekman, who's a bit of the man of the hour, if you will, in Classis Wisconsin. So Ben just sustained his examination for commissioned pastor a week ago today, at time of recording. So we're happy to just kind of rehash Classis a bit with Ben, but then also get into some of the ministry that's happening up there at Covenant CRC. So Ben, just how did you feel Classis went? Your first meeting of Classis in Wisconsin. Tell me your thoughts and
Yeah, absolutely. So first of all, it's great to be here at Oostburg CRC. It was awesome to make the drive down from Appleton. So much better being in studio with you versus doing this over
I will
Zoom.
just put out the invitation to anyone. If you want to make the drive and do this, I would love to. So this is
Awesome,
great. Although Zoom works fine too. Anyways.
for sure. But yes, this is actually my second classes meeting, believe it or not. I was at the fall classes meeting back last September where I preached my classes
Oh
sermon.
yeah, that's
Yeah.
right.
So I feel pretty comfortable coming in now with this being my second classes meeting for the exam because it was great to have the chance to meet a lot of delegates and become more familiar with classes as a whole last fall. But for the exam last week, Tuesday, I'm just so thankful for how smoothly everything went. I would say I had some really, really challenging questions from some of the delegates after the actual exam from my examiners. So I was grateful to work through those, especially in the practica section.
Was there anything? This is putting you on the spot a little bit. Was there anything that after the fact you did some more work on and that you learned?
That's a good question. I've done a little bit of post reflection on some of those things. I'm actually having lunch with one of my examiners tomorrow. So Chris Gansky and I are getting together in Fond du Lac to kind of recap the exam as a whole and to reflect on some of those things. So some of that might come tomorrow,
Sure.
actually. But overall, I feel just incredibly thankful for how well it went.
Yeah. You did a great job, and that's all I heard from anyone. So,
Well, thank you.
welcome for the third time, or however many times I've told you welcome. But tell me more about some of the ministry you're involved in at Covenant CRC. What are you working on? What's been on your heart?
Yeah, so my role at Covenant CRC is very multifaceted. So that's one of the things I love about being an associate pastor and something that you and I have talked about a little bit before, Zach, just the joy of being involved in several different ministry areas. So for me, that includes worship, youth ministry, adult discipleship, some preaching and pastoral care, but also outreach. In my first 6 months or so at Covenant, I've focused incredibly heavily on youth ministry, especially. So really taking a program that had definitely needed some extra support from the last couple of years, especially because my predecessor had left in the midst of the pandemic, and youth group had only been meeting every other week, but we're now meeting on a weekly basis, which has been really positive. We're doing a lot of events outside of Wednesday night youth group. We've done a fall and winter retreat, and we've got a summer trip coming up to Rehoboth and Zuni, New Mexico, which we're really excited about. So that's been a very key focus for me in my first 6, 7 months or so at Covenant, but also being involved in worship. Really enjoy leading worship on piano or guitar. We've developed a student worship team that's led
Oh,
worship a couple
excellent.
of times,
Yeah.
which has also been really positive, and I think something that is going to really help our students develop their gifts as well. So I'm looking forward to seeing what God does with that moving forward here.
It's nice to be able to double dip. Those of us who do youth ministry, youth discipleship kind of work, when you can get the people you're discipling involved in your other work.
Exactly.
It's kind of fun and can be really rewarding because you can dedicate so much time to it. Um, we talked a little bit before we hit record about the program you're using to frame some of the discipleship. Do you want to talk about 222
Yeah,
a little
for
bit?
sure. I briefly mentioned this for any of you that are listening in or watching. At my classes exam last week, I mentioned a program called 222 Disciple. And that's actually something that we are focusing in on at Covenant CRC as a means of one on one adult discipleship.
as is Delavan CRC, which I chatted with Tim Koyman about a couple weeks ago on Classis Wisconsin Weekly, but also mentioned in the Classis newsletter that went out. So 222 discipleship is really rolling in Classis Wisconsin, it sounds like.
Yes, so encouraged to hear that. I've been so impressed with the curriculum so far. So I'm actually mentored right now by another CRC pastor out in Connecticut who I've known for many, many years because he initially served at a church in West Michigan. But he and I meet on Zoom usually about once a week to go through the next lesson in the curriculum. But 222 is structured very heavily around the major themes in the Heidelberg Catechism. Yeah. So sin, salvation, service, or guilt, grace, and gratitude has 24 sessions. You work through the lesson each week with your assigned mentor. So the program itself is actually administered through Sunlight Community CRC down in Port St. Lucie, Florida. So their senior pastor, Scott Vanderplug, developed this curriculum a few years back and is working really hard to roll it out across the denomination because it's designed for one-on-one multiplicative discipleship. So the goal is that people who've been mentored through this program will then be able to make disciples themselves and so on and so forth. So I'm really excited about that, the potential that it has.
You said that you're being discipled by this pastor. Are you discipling your two already, or will that start?
That will start pretty soon.
Completion of the program.
That'll start near the completion. And I've got a few people in mind who I would like to disciple. A couple others from within our congregation at Covenant, and a few people I have in mind even outside of our church.
Yeah.
Who I think would be really good fits for the program.
And maybe you don't know this yet. And I asked the same question of Pastor Tim Koyman at Delavan CRC. Do you have in mind to start with, say, a couple of elders or people you identify as strong leaders who you know
Most definitely
will carry this on? That's the way that Tim did it as well, was find a couple of people who, it's not so much that they need new Bible knowledge, but just seeing it as an opportunity to equip them to be disciplers.
Exactly. It's all about equipping and teaching and really focusing in on those key themes of the gospel, because that's the message that we need to proclaim and that really drives our ministry in terms of what the Bible teaches.
Yeah. Yeah, that's really great. Have you, is Pastor Mark participating in that as well, or is
not quite at this point in time? I think he may be interested in coming on board as well. But me as associate pastor have really been the person that's focused on it most heavily in our congregation so far.
Yeah. Well, Ben, how can we be praying for you and your family and Covenant CRC?
Yeah, thanks for asking. I would just say just continued prayers as I begin settling more into my role at Covenant. I mean, it's been 6 or 7 months now, but moving forward here as I continue my seminary studies, I'm actually transferring to Reformed Theological Seminary in Orlando, which so far that process has just been so incredibly smooth. And I'm grateful to be able to finish my MDiv there under a curriculum that I think is very robust and will help me to gain the skills that I need to be an even better pastor, especially as I look toward eventually being ordained as a minister of the word in the CRC. So appreciate prayers for that. But again, also for my role at Covenant, that God would continue to help me be faithful to the calling he's given me, to such a wonderful congregation in Appleton. Prayers for my wife as well. She is an elementary teacher and has taken a year off from teaching right now, but is starting to really pray and discern about where God's leading her next year for an elementary teaching position. So
excellent. Well, thanks for making the drive.
Absolutely.
Ben, and sitting in person. And like I said, that invitation exists for everyone else. And someone from my church is taking you out for lunch.
Yes.
So I'll maybe cautiously make that invitation to anyone that me or someone from this congregation will probably treat you to lunch if you make the drive out here. But Ben, thanks for the time.
Absolutely. Thank you, Zach.